Not too long ago, a US senator dropped a bombshell. Money meant to help other countries had quietly been used to support terrorist groups for years. Now, for people who know how global politics work, this wasn't exactly earth-shattering. Let's be real. Western powers have a long track record of shaking things up in other countries when it suits their own goals. And guess what? That same pattern seems to be playing out in Burkina Faso. Just a few weeks back, there was a wild story coming out of the country. A foreign operative was caught red-handed with bags of cash. We're talking billions in Central African francs. His mission? Convince Burkinabe soldiers to turn against their leader, Captain IBRAHIM Traore. This wasn't just a bribe, it was a loyalty test. The message was clear. Will you stand with your country or sell out for money? Now here's where it gets even more interesting. In a recent interview, Traore shared something that really pulls back the curtain on how deep this problem goes. He said, "When we stood up in 2022, a bunch of officers trained in France were quickly contacted and asked to take action. They weren't trained to serve Africa. They were trained to protect French interests. And many African countries are full of these kinds of officers. Only God knows how many truly care about their homeland. Let that sink in. See, France has this habit. Whenever it's involved in African countries, it sends selected soldiers to train back in France. On the surface, that sounds like a great opportunity. But as Traores suggests, it's more like planting seeds of control. Those same soldiers, once back home, become tools. When Traore led his uprising, they were the first ones France reached out to, hoping to stop him in his tracks. But things didn't go as planned. Alright, picture this. Just a few weeks ago, something fishy was going on in Burkina Faso, and it had nothing to do with business or charity. Here's why it matters. Burkinabe officials uncovered a sneaky plot involving a foreign guy, a jaw-dropping 5 billion CFA francs, and some members of the country's own military. Yeah, you heard that right. Billions in cash and a plan that could shake the whole country. Now maybe this foreign agent thought he'd find some easy targets, soldiers trained abroad, maybe in France, who'd be willing to turn on their country for the right price. But if that was the plan, let's just say things didn't exactly go his way. So, what went down? It all started when this outsider rolled into Ouagadougou, the capital city. On the surface, he looked like just another businessman. Well-dressed, friendly, probably talking about opportunities and partnerships. You know, the usual investor stuff. But here's the twist. He wasn't there to build anything. Not schools, not hospitals. Not even a coffee shop. What he did bring, though, was a suitcase stuffed with 5 billion CFA francs. But that money wasn't meant to help anyone. It wasn't for roads, water, or jobs. Nope. It was meant to spark chaos, to mess things up from the inside, to flip loyal soldiers into traitors, and stir unrest that could bring the whole country to its knees. So, who was this guy really, and what exactly was he hoping to pull off? If you are still watching this video, it means you love it. Why not take out a second and hit that like button? Have you done that? Let us move on. They were so sure their plan would work, they didn't even try to hide it. Confident and bold, they sent a man straight into Burkina Faso with one job: convince a few trusted soldiers to turn their backs on Captain Traore and help take him down. And yes, the man came prepared, with a suitcase packed with 5 billion CFA francs. That's billions with a B. The idea? Buy loyalty. Simple as that. But things didn't go the way they expected. From the moment he started talking to the soldiers, things started falling apart. You see, the people he reached out to weren't just any soldiers. They were die-hard supporters of Traore, real patriots, and they weren't about to sell out their country, no matter how much money was on the table. But they didn't just say no and walk away. These soldiers were smart. Very smart. Instead of rejecting the man outright, they pretended to be interested. They played along, kept their cool, and acted like they were thinking about it. Why? Because they needed to know more. They had a gut feeling this guy wasn't working alone. There had to be someone bigger pulling the strings. So they quietly passed the information up the chain of command. Before long, Burkina Faso's national security team got involved, and together they started putting a plan in motion. Think spy movie stuff. For weeks, these brave soldiers kept up the act. They met with the man, listened to his pitch, smiled, nodded, while secretly gathering every bit of information they could. Every meeting, every conversation, every shady promise was passed back to military intelligence. It was risky. One wrong move and the whole thing could blow up. But they stayed focused. They knew what was at stake. Eventually, they had everything they needed, every detail, every piece of the puzzle. And that's when the real action began. November 8th, 2024. That was the day the final meeting was set. The man, still thinking he was pulling the strings, arranged to meet with the soldiers again. This time, he was ready to make it official. He would offer the full 5 billion CFA francs and seal the deal. But this money wasn't just a bribe. It was the fuel for something much bigger. A coup. One designed to push Traore out of power, throw the country into chaos and open the door for outsiders to step in and take control. What the man didn't know was that everything he was about to do had already been reported. The Burkinabe leadership had been one step ahead the entire time. A full counter-operation had been planned. At the exact moment the deal was supposed to go down, Burkinabe security forces stormed the meeting spot, catching the man completely off guard. His briefcase, stuffed with billions in cash, was seized on the spot. But this was far from over. What followed was an intense investigation, a deep dive into the real forces behind this operation. Who sent him? Who else was involved? And most importantly, what was the bigger plan? Because this wasn't just about Burkina Faso. The more officials dug, the clearer it became that this was part of a much larger scheme. One that aimed to destabilise not just Traore's leadership, but the entire Sahel region. Someone, somewhere, had seen Burkina Faso's internal challenges as an opportunity, and they were trying to exploit them. But then, something happened that these foreign backers never saw coming. Once word of the failed coup attempt got out, the entire country took notice. Burkina Faso was sending a message, loud and clear. No amount of money, no amount of outside interference would break the nation's unity. President Traore himself wasted no time addressing the people. In a powerful speech, he praised the soldiers who had risked everything to defend their country. This wasn't just about catching one man, it was about proving that Burkina Faso would not bow to corruption, foreign influence, or any hidden agenda trying to shake its foundation. Instead of the military turning against him, like the plotters had hoped, the opposite happened. Support for Traore surged. His troops, now more united than ever, stood firmly behind him. The people, seeing the bravery of their soldiers, rallied in solidarity. But while this one plot had been crushed, one question remained: who was really pulling the strings? Because let's be honest, this man wasn't some mastermind acting alone. He was a pawn, a messenger, someone sent by powerful interests who had everything to gain from Burkina Faso falling into chaos. And if this was just one attempt, could there be more? Burkina Faso might not be the richest country in Africa in terms of money, but when it comes to natural resources, it's sitting on a gold mine. Literally. Beneath its soil lie vast reserves of gold, manganese, and phosphate, making it an attractive target for those who see Africa's wealth as something to control rather than something for Africans to benefit from. And history has shown that whenever an African country starts taking charge of its own resources, foreign powers lurking in the shadows aren't too happy about it. Burkina Faso's location in the Sahel, combined with its recent political shifts, has made it a prime target for external players looking to manipulate events to their advantage. But this recent coup attempt wasn't just about causing a little unrest, it was part of something much bigger. According to intelligence gathered by the Burkinabe military, the captured suspect had direct ties to foreign operatives stationed in neighbouring countries. These operatives weren't acting alone. They were working for powerful forces, entities with deep pockets and a vested interest in keeping Burkina Faso from standing on its own 2 feet. This was never just about bribing a few soldiers. It was about breaking Burkina Faso's independence and making sure the country remained under the grip of foreign influence. But here's where things get even more sinister. The goal wasn't just to destabilise Burkina Faso. No, the real plan was much bigger, spreading chaos across the entire Sahel region. If Burkina Faso crumbled, it would send shockwaves throughout West Africa, making it easier for these outside players to step in and tighten their hold on the region's wealth. So why Burkina Faso? What made it such a high priority target? Simple. Under President IBRAHIM Traore, Burkina Faso has started to push back against foreign control. Despite dealing with security challenges, Traore has made it clear that Burkina Faso's resources belong to its people, not foreign corporations or hidden power brokers. In just a short time, he's already begun renegotiating contracts with international companies, taking back control of the country's gold industry and putting national interests first, something that hasn't gone unnoticed by those who've spent years profiting off the old system. For them, a stable and self-reliant Burkina Faso is bad for business. This entire plot to throw the country into chaos was never about democracy, human rights, or any of the usual excuses foreign powers use. It was about keeping Burkina Faso weak enough to be controlled, ensuring that profits and influence stayed in the hands of those who've always pulled the strings. But thanks to the unwavering loyalty of the Burkinabe military, the plot was exposed before it could do any real damage. Now, when you look at everything Traore has faced since taking office, one thing becomes clear: this is far from the first attempt to take him out. In fact, since he took power, he's survived more than 9 assassination attempts and coup plots. 9. And that raises a very troubling question. How long before another attempt is made? It's no secret that among all current African leaders, Traore has been one of the most heavily targeted. But here's the most painful part. Many of these attempts haven't just been orchestrated by foreign players. Some of them have come from within Burkina Faso itself, aided and abetted by outsiders who see Traore's leadership as a threat to their interests. Since Ibrahim Traore stepped into power in September 2022, it's been one close call after another. In less than 2 years, he's survived 10 assassination attempts. 10. That's more than any other African leader in such a short time. The very first attempt happened just 2 months after he replaced the former military head, Paul-Henri Damiba. And here's the twist: Damiba himself was behind the most recent one, number 10. Yep, the same man Traore ousted came back around. This time not with words, but with a deadly plan. Back when the first attempt happened, Traore didn't retaliate with force. He actually said he knew who was responsible, but chose to sit them down for a talk instead. He warned them about people offering bribes to kick him out of power and urged them not to fall for it. For a while, that approach seemed to calm things down. There were no major threats for almost a year, until September 2023. That's when the second attempt was made. This time, though, Traore took no chances. He launched an official investigation, and it didn't take long to find the culprits. 3 soldiers were arrested and charged with everything from disobeying orders to plotting against the state. After that, the attacks started coming in rapid fire. Later that same September, another attempt was made, and from that moment until September of this year, there have been a total of 8 different plots to either kill or overthrow Traore. But what makes the 10th attempt stand out is how dark and dangerous it was. This wasn't just another plan to take out the president, it turned into a nightmare for the country. Unlike the earlier attacks, this one led to the deaths of hundreds of people, both soldiers and civilians. It wasn't just personal anymore, it was national. Reports say the brains behind this operation weren't just locals. It involved Burkinabe citizens living in other countries, like Côte d'Ivoire, Ghana, and Nigeria, who were working behind the scenes. But they weren't acting alone. According to the country's security minister, the people involved included civilians, current and former military officers, and were supported by a mix of powerful players, foreign intelligence agencies, activists, and even business people inside Burkina Faso. The web of betrayal runs deep. Among those caught in the latest plot to overthrow President Ibrahim Traore were some of Burkina Faso's most well-known figures, former ministers, journalists, even a former member of parliament. But the biggest shocker, the involvement of Paul-Henri Damiba, the very man Traore removed from power in September 2022. At first, Damiba had seemed to accept his fate. He stepped down without a fight, giving the impression that he was ready to move on. But behind the scenes, it appears he never let go of the grudge. Instead, he worked in the shadows, aligning himself with foreign backers and local conspirators to bring down Traore's government. Yet, Damiba's return to the game isn't even the most disturbing part of this plot. The real horror lies in just how far these individuals were willing to go to regain control. During interrogations, those arrested revealed something chilling. Many of the recent insurgent attacks that have killed hundreds of civilians and soldiers weren't just random acts of terror. They were deliberately coordinated by these plotters. In a move that defies all morality, they reached out to insurgent groups, striking deals to launch violent assaults across the country. Their goal? Create chaos, weaken the government, and make Traore look incapable of leading. But Burkina Faso's security forces weren't caught off guard. They moved quickly, tracking the conspirators and arresting several key players before the plot could unfold completely. Their swift action may have prevented even greater destruction. Yet this raises an even bigger question. Why does this keep happening? What is it about Traore that makes him such a constant target? Before we dive into that, take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. Your support helps us bring you more in-depth analysis on the issues shaping Africa today. Now, if you take a step back and look at all these attacks, you'll notice something they all have in common. Each one was orchestrated by people from Burkina Faso itself. Every single coup attempt, every assassination plot, every effort to destabilize the government has been led by local actors. But why, if Traore has widespread support among the people? Why are there factions determined to remove him? To understand that, you have to look beyond Burkina Faso, because when it comes to African politics, there's always more than just local interests at play. External forces are never far behind, quietly pulling strings in the background. Africa is rich, full of gold, oil, diamonds, rare minerals, and land. And for a very long time, powerful countries like the US and France have had their eyes on those riches. But here's the thing, they don't usually try to get them by simply trading fairly. No, that would mean paying full price and respecting local control. Instead, what these countries often do is try to control the people in charge. See, when an African government leans toward the West, deals get signed easily. These deals usually give away access to valuable resources for almost nothing. In return, the country gets promises of development, a few grants and a whole lot of handshakes at international summits. But behind all the smiles and photo ops, the real goal is simple: make it easier to take what they want. It's a plan that's worked many times. In the past, even when African countries started waking up and demanding better, many of their leaders were still cozy with the West. They smiled for the cameras, signed unfair contracts, and turned a blind eye as wealth flowed out of their countries and into foreign bank accounts. In exchange, they were left alone to do whatever they pleased, hoard money, silence critics, and cling to power for decades. All they had to do was keep elections looking somewhat clean, so the West could keep pretending democracy was alive and well. Look around today and you'll still see it. Take Equatorial Guinea, for example. This nation has had the same leader for over 30 years. This man has stayed in office for so long, people joke that he'll never leave. And yet, despite ruling over some of the poorest population in Africa, this president lived like royalty. But don't expect Western governments to say a word about it. Why? Because those leaders play nice. They support Western interests, and in return, they're treated like friends, not dictators. What happens when an African leader refuses to bow down? That's when things get dangerous. History shows us that when a leader stands up to the West and says, "Our country first," they suddenly get labelled. Words like dictator, strongman, or authoritarian start showing up in headlines. And not long after that, something bad usually happens. Sometimes even death. Just think about Thomas Sankara, Patrice Lumumba, Muammar Gaddafi. All leaders who wanted Africa to control its own future. All of them died violently, and all were painted as villains by Western-backed media before they were taken out, usually by people from their own countries, to make it look like the nation turned against them. Sound familiar? That's exactly what's happening right now with President IBRAHIM Traore of Burkina Faso. From the moment he stepped into leadership, he made one thing clear. He wasn't going to dance to anyone's tune. He wasn't pro-West, he was pro-Burkina Faso. Every decision he's made has been about putting his country first, whether in mining, politics, or military alliances. And because of that, the pressure has been non-stop. He's faced sanctions, negative press, repeated coup attempts. Western media regularly paints him as a dangerous man using anti-French talk to stay in power. But the real goal behind these headlines is to turn the people of Burkina Faso against him, to make them believe he's the problem, not the system he's fighting. It's the same game they played in Libya before Gaddafi was overthrown, but so far, Traore has survived everything thrown his way. And if the latest attempted coup showed us anything, it's that his military stands with him. His people still believe in his vision,